My name is Giovanna Zanelato, and I am a marketing associate here at Social Annex. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few things so you know what to expect and how to participate in today's event. So a link of the recorded webinar will be sent. If you experience technical problems, please insert a question in the chat area. And you may ask questions anytime by clicking the chat button and typing your question. We will collect this and address them during Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now, I would like to introduce you to Al, the Chief Strategist here at Social Annex. He will be the presenter in today's session.
Thank you, Giovanna, and thank you everyone for joining. I just want to make sure the audio is okay for everyone, so if you have any questions or any concerns, you can type that in the chat box. But a quick introduction to everyone so everyone knows sort of a little bit of background about me and who I am to set the context for the webinar, essentially. So I'm Al. I'm the Chief Strategist here at Social Annex. A little bit of personal background about me. I'm father of two wonderful daughters, 7 and 2. You know, every day is wonderful with them, essentially, and you know, everything I do is kind of shaped around a lot of things I learned from them as well. I speak 5 languages fluently, not that it matters on this webinar for sure, because I'm definitely going to stick to English on this one. Caffeine has a little reverse effect on me, so it usually puts me to sleep, which is odd, so I usually try to drink my Diet Coke right before going to sleep. Now, a little bit more background about me. I have started my career in product and then essentially moved on to technology and marketing from product, and then went on to start Social Annex. And I ran e-commerce for a company called Teleflora for a while and learned a lot of my e-commerce skills from that time, essentially. And during that time, became really passionate about customer loyalty and advocate marketing. Essentially. So that's kind of the idea. Now, we're getting some questions around audio. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. So if you can, please put that in the chat box and ensure that if you have any concerns, we can address them. So let's jump right into the webinar here specifically and go to the next step. So today's webinar, we're going to focus on a few different pieces. We're going to talk a little bit about Social Annex so you know who we are. We're also going to talk a little bit of a baselining period of user-generated content, ratings, and reviews in 2015. And we're going to talk about the new age of user-generated content in 2016 and where we're going from there. And then we'll get into best practices around how we can improve user-generated content as well. So a little bit about Social Annex to start here a little bit. So we have been around for over 5 years. We have a little over 250 global customers, about 140 employees across 3 different continents, essentially. And we turn browsers into buyers into loyalists, loyalists into advocates, and advocates into driving more browsers. So all of our products are essentially focused on those aspects of things. And so a little bit more about the product so you can kind of understand what we do and set the context for the rest of the presentation. You know, our main focus is customer loyalty and advocate marketing. And within customer loyalty, our objective is to make your buyers turn into loyal customers, but then the other pieces of advocate marketing support turning browsers into buyers as well as converting into customers. So the user-generated content piece of it that we're going to focus on is very heavily focused on trying to convert browsers into buyers, and we're going to talk about a lot of best practices there today. Okay. So user-generated content helps and enables to leverage your customer's voice and builds trust within that. And there are 2 different products that usually in the past we've all focused on in terms of user-generated content. The first one is ratings and reviews, and we kind of have come to really depend on it over the years, essentially, where you can see what other independent people are sharing as their opinions about certain products, and usually found on product pages. Sometimes the ratings are also displayed on category pages, where you can essentially see a user's opinions about your products, if you will. The second product that is more focused there is customer Q&A. And customer Q&A is essentially a dialogue that you can facilitate between your customers, where a customer that might have a question about your product may be able to ask a question, and that question can be answered by another potential customer that that has purchased your product, or another potential future sort of repeat customer that has purchased your product, thereby making them more engaged in your products, as well as by experts, which is you yourself as a company. Now, we know that 60% of consumers seek out user-generated content before making purchases. It's a very, very important aspect of conversion to drive, conversion. But primarily in 2015, the main uses of user-generated content, primarily reviews and Q&A, was for 2 or 3 different aspects. The first one was conversion. You want to drive conversion on the product pages, and by having specific information on the product pages, other consumers using your products, you can definitely get that conversion further. The other sort of aspect of this is to drive SEO, because fresh content that's generated on the page definitely helps with driving SEO on the page. So let's dive a little deeper so we can set a little bit of a baseline around how 2015 user-generated content was being used. So as a baseline for SEO, fresh content is always a good sort of pattern for SEO. We all know that. And by having reviews and having new reviews show up on the product pages, that SEO is definitely sort of improved. The second aspect of SEO is making sure the content is on page itself. So the advice you must have heard when you implemented reviews and ratings in the past potentially would be to make sure that the reviews are not within JavaScript, that they are on page. What happened in 2015, or a little earlier than that, was also that Google introduced this new algorithm using micro formats. And micro formats essentially are in 3 different formats that you see here, the most important being microdata, where in your HTML of the page, you can pass to Google and to other search engines specifically how the review format is, and when that review format is passed to Google, Google can then display it like you see on your screen here below, where they can essentially see specifically the rating and the number of reviews along with the product when it appears in organic search, which essentially releases and increases conversion from the Google search to generate that click-through back to your site. The second thing we focused very heavily on in 2015 in terms of a baseline was conversion metrics and optimizing the review formats to ensure there's a lot more information in the review that a consumer may need to make that specific purchase. So, in the past, a traditional review was just a headline, maybe a rating, and some text describing the review. Essentially the idea here is that you may also have, in addition, a lot more information with the review now within the format. So you can essentially have not only the rating and the text describing the review, but whether people recommend that product, whether people can essentially have a distributed sorting algorithm where they can sort by the newest rating or the oldest rating. They can sort by rating breakdowns, essentially, to see how many 5-star ratings there were and 4-star ratings there were. Or even get sub-ratings down to the level where you can see on the screen on the right side, people can rate the specific product by their comfort level or their support level or the size or the width and so on. They can even say whether the review was helpful. So all these different additional aspects, again, added a lot more robustness to the review process, and essentially made it, even more stronger and easier for consumers to use to make that end decision when they were deciding whether or not to buy that product. But again, all of these factors were very much 2015. And if you've implemented some of these baselines, that's great. If you haven't, you definitely need to catch up. But with that said, the world is different now. There's a lot more happening that we can go into 2016. And so now we jump into the root of this webinar, which is focusing on the 10 new age concepts that we're seeing that is completely revolutionizing the way user-generated content has improved, and what you should be thinking about in 2016 and beyond to make your reviews and your user-generated content even more robust, if you will. So let's jump right in. The first one focuses on the advent of social networks like Instagram and Pinterest, where pictures now are a lot more abundant than text. And pictures now essentially allow consumers to get a much bigger and better picture from, than textual reviews. Here's an example of a customer of ours, Bed Bath & Beyond. If you go to a product page and you search for the Darth Vader toaster, you'll see that below the product information, you will see essentially a bunch of pictures describing the product. Now, you can see very quickly, if I was just looking at the product information, I'll see that this is a toaster. And usually I can essentially see, that the toaster is, looks like Darth Vader and that sort of bit. But I can't really see what the toaster really does from any of the stock images, if you will. But if you don't read the product description, you go directly to the information below, you will see very quickly that the toaster essentially puts out toast that has the Star Wars logo on it, which is very, very interesting. So now it all makes sense in terms of what this toaster is doing. And so now with this transition of using user-generated imagery that has been curated, Bed Bath & Beyond has been able to essentially showcase those images on specific product pages that allow users to get exact information about the usage of that product even more, which is our first concept and the first thing that we want to sort of talk about that has improved in terms of user-generated content, which is using pictures to tell a story and using pictures to essentially communicate a message of how the product is being used. Now, the benefits of this, as you can imagine, are a lot. One, quickly giving information about the usage of the product. Secondly, reducing the return rate. One of the major reasons we see sort of the return rate of products is consumers didn't understand how to use that product. And by having these pictures and also videos about the products that are curated by your company and showcased on product pages, you can definitely reduce that aspect of things. Now, when people click on that, they can get a much bigger picture of that, of the usage of that. So now I can click in and specifically see more details about that picture and get more information. And we see that that has about 40% more engagement than regular reviews. Now, the other aspect of things is enabling discovery. Now, reviews and user-generated content was always great for conversion, but it wasn't as good for discovery, not until now. But now with all these images that we're actually capturing from the different social networks, from the different hashtags, curating it, not only can we put those on product pages, we can now create galleries of content that are very specific for enabling discovery. So in this case, if someone is searching for renovating their bedroom and they want to search for specific ideas and themes around that, there can be a showcase gallery of other consumers with images and how they have done that using Bed Bath & Beyond products, and hence be able to essentially use that information within their experience, if you will. So now user-generated content is enabling not only access to information and making it easier for consumers to buy a specific product, it's enabling discovery that normally wasn't available before. Now, here's the second aspect of our second concept in terms of improvements in UGC, which delves into personalization, which we should focus on reviews as well. Now, kind of before I explain personalization and reviews, the first action that most people do when they go to a reviews page is they essentially go and try to look at reviews within a product page, and the first thing they do is sort by lowest rated reviews. So that's one thing that you actually don't want people to do. You want people to go to a product page and essentially ensure they get the right experience, but not start diving into the negative aspects of maybe some people that may have had a bad experience, if you will. And so to do that, one of the things that really applies is essentially ensuring that we can apply the website behavior directly to the reviews as well. And the context of that is when people browse a website, we learn a lot about them. And personalization is all about learning what we learn about them in terms of their browsing behavior and applying that context to giving them better information so they convert easier. And that personalization usually was used in the past in the context of primarily just, product. So if I browse a certain type of product or a category of product, I would then see, products related to that product easily. So the you may also like section and that sort of it. But that personalization aspect can now be applied to reviews as well, where if someone is browsing, for example, a category called birthday, and the assumption here is if they're on a gifting site and they typed in or went through the birthday category and came to the specific product and are now looking at reviews for that product, or if they typed in birthday gifts in the search box, and now we have context that this person is looking for something related to birthday. Now that product may belong to multiple such categories, but because we know the context of how someone wants to use that product for a birthday, we can then showcase reviews that are related to birthdays first, and contextually extremely relevant to a consumer, because if I go to that page and I'm starting to look for more content, and on the first few reviews I see are related to birthday, when I was searching for birthday, it really it solidifies my thought process that other consumers have used it in the same context, and hence makes it more personal, essentially. Product information in shopping carts essentially can also be used in a better way, where you can essentially get specific information based on what people have added to the shopping cart. So if I have added a product to the shopping cart and I go back to the same product, now you can showcase reviews that show why people picked that product over other products. And if that's something you can show, then it solidifies my reasoning behind going forward and purchasing that product. Because if I've added something to the shopping cart and then I go back to the product page on the same product page, I'm hunting for more information. I'm not really satisfied, and for some reason, I haven't bought that product. And so it's important for us to provide that reason the second time they go to the product page. But you can't really change the product description automatically, but you can change the reviews to show the right reviews first at that point in time. Again, these are some examples of personalization concepts that can be applied to reviews based on browsing behavior that the person has done on the website. You can also apply personalization based on review behavior. So essentially the idea here is a review is essentially a best sort of way in how people are using it. So if someone sorted the review by the newest review, or if someone clicked on the comfort rating to learn more about the comfort rating, we now know they're really interested in new reviews about this product that were that said that the product was very comfortable to use. And in that case specifically, the next time around they use some other product, we can then showcase the newest reviews that were highly rated on comfort, right? So again, this is contextually relevant to the consumer because that's what is important to them. And the consumer is now showing us and telling us by their website behavior across the other parts of the website or even within the review what they want, and we can apply that contextual behavior to the next set of reviews. Now, in addition to personalization, what's more important is relevance of the review again. So personalization is a way to essentially improve the relevance, but again, reviews is no longer a numbers game. So if I go to a product page and I see 400 reviews about a specific product, that's good. That tells me that a lot of people have reviewed it well. I also see the ratings pretty high. It kind of builds my confidence. But when I actually click on the product page and start reviewing these products essentially, how do we really make sure that the review is relevant to me as an end consumer? And especially if I haven't browsed the website, you may not have enough information about me. So how do we then make it relevant to a specific target market depending on that specific person? And one of the things that we have found useful is using social login in that context. Social login, just to kind of give you an idea of setting the baseline, social login is the ability for people to log in using their social network. So using Facebook, using Google, using different social networks, essentially establish an identity on the website. But in addition to establishing that identity, it gives us a lot more information about that end user from their social network, which helps us personalize the context of what they're, of what the end user is using and their background, their personal information around who they are, to be able to use to personalize it even further and make it relevant. So by getting that information about them, their age and their gender, their likes and interests potentially. You can further apply those keywords to contextualize reviews by matching keywords within the review with the keywords that we established from the social network and essentially make it even more personal, if you will. Now, here are some other ways to make it even more relevant. You know, the gallery that I showed you before was a generic gallery, but now you can create personalized galleries based on what people with your style like. So by looking at a social graph information of a person, we can say, hey, this is kind of your age and gender and your background. Based on this, let me compare against other people that are similar to you and show you what these other people like as well, if you will, from that perspective. So that's the idea of what people with your style like, essentially. Similarly, you can also show, sort of content around what other people in your geographic location like. Obviously, in the winter, what people want on the West Coast may not be the same as what people want on the East Coast. And so, again, applying that contextual relevance within the personalization aspect makes it even more stronger to show the right type of content, whether it be reviews, whether it be pictures or videos, any type of user-generated content, contextual to that specific person. So we've talked a little bit about the first three concepts of using beyond just text into pictures, of personalizing that aspect for the end consumer and allowing the end consumer to get more personalized information rather than generic information, of making it contextually relevant. We're going into deeper categories of solicitation. Now, in 2015, we always did, we know that solicitation is the best way of getting reviews. And we know that 90% of negative reviews are usually unsolicited. When people have a bad experience, they are very vocal about it. But also 90% of positive reviews are solicited. If people are happy about it, they actually, they expect that's the norm. And so you have to kind of ask them to submit a review because otherwise you won't get one. So solicitation is a very important part of gathering a good amount of reviews. Now, in 2015 and before, the traditional solicitation process was, hey, you make a purchase and let's send you an email. And the email would say, hey, here are the different products that you just bought. Hopefully, if you love them, please send in a review about it. And depending on the type of product, this email may be sent, a different time. So if it's a seasonal product, maybe 7 days, perishable product between 7 and 14 days, soft goods 14 to 21, hard goods 21 to 30. So that's information, to send that out. But again, it was very hard-coded to specific things. So it didn't really intelligently predict the time that it would do that. So now the new concept is now to apply intelligent automation to make that process even stronger. And internally here at Social Annex, we call it SEA, or the Smart Engagement Algorithm. And the way that works essentially is that the algorithm automatically decides based on how, what the product is that has been purchased, or the time of the day that the email is sent out, or the day of the week that the email was sent out, or the time of the year that the email was sent out, or based on personal historical data around that person that we might know from their personalization aspect, or their social login, or their past history, when to send that email out to get the most outcome in terms of open rates of that solicitation email, in terms of click rates, as well as conversion rates to write the review. And we can add additional drifts to get additional leverage. So if people actually sent, got one email, they opened it, maybe they got dragged into something else and forgot to write that review, you can send them a reminder saying, hey, we realized you tried this the last time, you couldn't finish it, maybe you got pulled into something else. Hey, by the way, can you please come this time and submit this review? We can also essentially make it more intelligent by optimizing that time. So by looking at the types of products, if someone buys a specific type of product, especially if you have different categories of products, we can optimize the time that these emails are sent out for new people, thereby improving the conversion rates of that. And so that's another aspect that should be tried to improve that solicitation and get more reviews. Now, getting onto the next concept of what's new in user-generated content, this idea deals with amplification. And the idea here is that a lot of times, this has been used in traditional marketing for a long time, where you figure out a message that's resonated with your audience, and then you use media to to really push out that message and amplify that message. I mean, in politics, I think we all know this has been used over and over. A message that resonates with the audience, essentially, is now sent out through all different channels to ensure that consumers see that message and more people see that message. And the same thing can happen with user-generated content. We can use owned and paid media to optimize the outcome on that message, essentially, to reach even more users for your most popular user-generated content. So here's some examples of amplification. The first example of amplification is using email marketing. And so in our previous example of our famous Darth Vader toaster, when someone uses the site and adds this to the shopping cart, but doesn't buy, in the past, we've used effectively what we call the cart abandonment email. And the cart abandonment email, the way it works is, hey, someone added something to the shopping cart, they didn't buy it. After some time, you send them an email saying, hey, just a reminder, you added this to your shopping cart, you didn't buy it. Sometimes you might add a coupon code to it and say, hey, here's another 10% off. But do you really want to give margin away for that? For a reason that you don't think, maybe the reason wasn't because they wanted to shop it cheaper. Maybe the reason was because they didn't understand how to use the product. But we're making the assumption by giving them a discount that it's going to lure them back when the main reason was something else. It may not be price, essentially. And so by giving them user-generated content, this can essentially give you more information about the product as well. And by doing so, you can essentially have better information and make that conversion happen. Amplification can also be done using Facebook ads. So now you can take your best user-generated content. In this case, essentially, you can see that this company has essentially taken their best review and then made it into a Facebook ad. And essentially, these Facebook ads have tracked to perform about 23% better than traditional Facebook ads. So a traditional Facebook ad would be just putting some image and a picture and some information and amplifying it using paid media on Facebook. You can do that now by adding a review, and we see that performs about 23%. Now, in addition, here's another example of retargeting. Now, retargeting traditionally would be, in that previous example, I've added something to my shopping cart. I go to other sites. I now get retargeted with content. I see the product image, and hopefully I'll remember to click back. But again, you can add user-generated pictures into that retargeting ad and essentially allow for consumers to see, more information about the product, and thereby getting them a reason to buy that product again. So these retargeting ads with user-generated content have about a 2.5x higher click-through rate, essentially, which is extremely high in retargeting senses and should be something that you should test definitely. So we've talked about ways now to generate more reviews through solicitation. We've talked about ways to amplify those reviews. We've also talked about ways to essentially get more pictures and other types of media within the reviews and personalize the reviews as well as personalize the user-generated content. Now let's go into some more advanced techniques of incorporating and incenting people to write those reviews. And this first technique essentially focuses on converting loyalists to advocates. And people that write reviews are usually advocates. So these are people that you want to sort of really amplify, or these are people that you want to really reward so that they can do it more often. And here's an example of our customer, Olympus Cameras, that's doing this really effectively, where within their traditional loyalty program, they've incorporated rewarding for actions that generate more user-generated content. So in addition to generating, getting rewarded for making a purchase, they're also rewarding for writing product reviews that get accepted. They're rewarding for pictures that get added to the Olympus gallery. Now, Olympus is all about cameras. Cameras is all about pictures. Pictures is a big value for them. They want essentially people to share as many pictures as possible. And by rewarding those actions in a holistic loyalty program, they've been able to essentially incent more people to do so. So essentially that's an example of a rewarding action now holistically done through a loyalty program to convert your loyalists into advocates and giving them more ways to essentially spread the word for you and thereby become more active in your program as well. Here's another example of a customer of ours called Chaparral Motorsports, and they go much deeper into the product page and explain, even at the review page level, that, hey, if you write a review and it gets accepted, you will get 10 rewards points. And they do that for reviews, they do that for Q&A. So again, another aspect and example of how a loyalty program, a traditional, simple, points-based loyalty program can be extended into rewarding for additional behaviors to generate more user-generated content and turn your loyalists into advocates. Now, moving further, the next concept deals more with community. Now, if you're as old as I am and you've been in the world of e-commerce for a while, back in the days between, let's just say, the 2000 to 2005 timeframe, we talked a lot about community, right? At that time, community was forums and blogs, and we all wanted to, as retailers and manufacturers, we all wanted to create a community of our consumers to create that forum for people to interact with and a blog for people to participate in. But we all found out that some of these were not as effective as we would have thought, because people wanted to interact in a general forum like a Facebook and MySpace at the time, and then now a lot more other social networks have come up, rather than in a wall of your site to participate in your forum, if you will. But now, with the advent of additional social sort of marketing techniques, you can essentially really advance that into a new age community where people actually want to participate in. So this is an example of a trending gallery community for one of our customers, Dr. Brent, where they've actually created a Pinterest-like board for allowing shoppers to connect and share content, products, information, as well as connect with each other and see what other people are following in terms of products and content and user-generated content, and essentially create a community around specific pieces to help people make a decision. And another example is, in this case, Olympus Cameras again, which I was talking about earlier, where they've got a whole community around pictures and people that are excited about pictures and allowing them to share those pictures within their community, browse other pictures and get inspired by them, if you will, and create a whole community around that aspect. So, creating a community or a forum needs a lot more effort, but now with the advent of getting this user-generated content automatically through hashtags, we can enable that discovery of that content and filling up that information a lot more, thereby enabling the community growth on your website to grow a lot faster. So this advent of new community is now allowing for a new age of user-generated content discovery within the community. The next aspect of this deals with how you can enhance the customer profile using user-generated content. Now, a traditional My Account page usually has a few different parts to it. It usually has the most important part that most consumers use is the orders history page, where I can go see all the orders I've done, and potentially for new orders, I can see where my shipping information is, my tracking information, and so on, and if my order number, and so if I need to call customer service, I can get a phone number. That's all good. But how can then you use that information or user-generated content to make the post-purchase, experience of the consumer better, so that A, they can come back and buy more from you, B, they can be upsold into other products, C, they won't return the product that they bought, because one of the biggest reasons, again, for returns is that they didn't understand how to use that product. So once they've made that purchase, and they go to the My Account page, usually they're going to check the status of their order. You can direct them and solve all these problems. And you can do that by enhancing your My Account page by showing them the reviews that have been submitted by those people, the questions and answers related to that product that other people have asked. So if they get that product and they have questions that they want to get answers about, they can easily get that from that page itself and not have to go search for it on other places. You can also show them images and videos that other people have uploaded. So imagine if you are buying a camera and you're struggling in how to use it, and there's a how-to video that some user uploaded for that camera that has been curated. Now that how-to video can also be showcased on the product page, but it can also be showcased on the My Account page. So when a consumer that bought that product has a question and doesn't understand how to use it, they can easily get to that information from their My Account page about the products that they have bought, essentially. Even if that product goes out of stock, you can still store the user-generated content for that product so users can go back to it as a reference and get more information about it. And essentially can reduce your return rates, build more consumer confidence about your products by getting that information quicker, as well as answer questions about the usage of the product, and potentially also showcase user-generated content not just about the products they bought. You can showcase user-generated content about similar products. So if they bought a specific camera, you can showcase a lens that goes along with that product if you want to upsell that lens, and hence show how that lens goes really well with this camera and why they should consider buying that lens by using that user-generated content on the lens to showcase that on the My Account page. So again, this concept deals with using user-generated content to make people's lives easier after they buy the product, build more consumer confidence, reduce returns, and generate more upsells by having contextual user-generated information about that product. The next sort of piece or information goes into essentially expanding the experience that consumers have online into their in-store experience so that their in-store experience is similar to their online experience. Now, with this whole omni-channel aspect, we have, been trying for the last couple of years or more to really build a holistic experience across all the different channels that consumers interact with us on. So whether it's the website or a mobile site, whether it's an app or it's essentially your store, consumers have the same type of information. So how can we then allow consumers to get user-generated content easier when they're actually shopping in store? And you'll see a lot of people doing this in store now where they're walking in a store and they look at a specific product and now they suddenly want to read reviews about that product. So they pick up their phone and try to Google that product and try to get reviews about that product. But guess what happens at that point in time? They walk into a store and they see an ad from Amazon and they see a price that might be slightly lower or something else that enticed them, and they decide not to buy it. They walk out and then they go buy somewhere offline. That's something you don't want to have happen. And so by having these user-generated content pieces easily accessible within a store itself, you can enhance their experience, build true omni-channel experiences within your stores itself, and essentially give them information at their fingertips that they normally would have to pick up their phone for and reduce the risk severely that they end up buying somewhere else and walk out of the store not buying at that point in time. So thereby increasing conversion in store. And then lastly, we want to sort of talk about measuring everything. We want to make sure that you're measuring not only the traditional user-generated content stats of how many submissions we got and how many were approved. We want to make sure that you measure that you have coverage across all your products. It's important that every product has enough coverage, and if it doesn't, then you use techniques like the SEA algorithm or the smart engagement algorithm to get more reviews or get more images and content. You can measure the sentiment analysis of essentially positive or negative reviews or the breakdown of those reviews. So you have that information available by product. You measure the financial statistics around revenue and the orders that were influenced by those reviews and the orders that were referred to sharing of those reviews and the orders that caused conversion and increased organic traffic because of reviews and because of user-generated content in general, if you will. And you want to measure the merchandising statistics of how this essentially can drive further important merchandising. So look at the most rated products or the least rated products or the highest rated products, or where the rating is rising fast or falling fast, if you will, or products that have shipping issues or fit issues, and thereby address those problems specifically. So by measuring all of these different aspects of information that consumers are now giving you through their visual reviews or through their textual reviews, you can now measure a lot more about that and make your product sort of merchandising a lot stronger. So in today's webinar, we've reviewed a lot of different concepts, from going into essentially the basics of what we expect you might have been doing in 2015 if you had reviews, which is improving your SEO, making sure your content was on page, making sure that you had microformats built in, making sure you had the best-in-class aspects of a review incorporated on your website, to now going into 2016 and beyond and applying new concepts of reviews. And as a recap, we talked about introducing visual reviews, which is visual commerce, essentially, as we call it, by enabling discovery of those visual reviews. We talked about personalizing the reviews and creating relevancy within the reviews to showcase based on people's usage on the website and creating more contextually relevant reviews around, the usage of your website and what you know about the consumers, to give them the best information quickly so they can essentially move on to the next step of making that purchase. We talked about amplifying the reviews using paid media and owned media and earned media. We also talked about essentially measuring every aspect of the review, as well as extending it to an omni-channel perspective, if you will, as well. And so these are all concepts that I hope were helpful to you in taking your user-generated content, reviews, questions and answers, and visual commerce to the next level. And that's about it for today's webinar. We're happy to take any questions, and as we said before, if you have any questions, please do type them into your search box, and we'll wait for a minute if we have any questions here.
Thank you, Al. We are now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. It looks like we have 3 questions already. So the first question is, if we already have a ratings and review system, how do we add some of these advanced pieces that you mentioned today?
Okay, so if you have a ratings and review system, you can definitely add on the Q&A piece as well as the visual commerce piece, because all of these, while they're independent of each other, while they're sort of tied in towards each other, they're also independent products, so you can essentially invest in visual reviews and invest in other parts of visual reviews if you wanted to. So that's an aspect of it. However, I think I strongly recommend sort of, discussing with your provider to see if they have these aspects in there, if you are using a provider, or, talk to someone like us, or potentially also, if you build those in-house, to share these ideas with your technology team to see how aspects can be incorporated.
So we have another question. When people hashtag images, should we request for rights before we publish these images, or can we publish automatically?
I'm assuming we're talking about the visual commerce aspect or the visual reviews aspect, if you will, from that perspective. You definitely have to request rights. So there's multiple ways in how you can collect images. One is by allowing people to upload those images. The second one is by allowing people to hashtag images and using your brand or different hashtags that they might use. And when you do it using hashtags, people give you an implicit permission to use it, but not a real explicit permission. And so we highly recommend through a process we call the rights management workflow, which we may not have time to go into details on this webinar, but you can find more information about that on our website within the visual commerce section. You essentially should request rights for every visual asset that you get from hashtags. And the way you do that is through a process of messaging back to that end consumer and saying, hey, can we please use that image? And the consumer will then reply back with a specific hashtag saying, yes, you can use it. And then you maintain an audit trail so that in the future you make sure that you have a rights management audit trail available. And even if that consumer then pulls down that image, you still have the rights available to use that image. So definitely highly recommended that you should do that through a rights management workflow. And ideally, if you go to our website, you'll get a lot more information about it.
Okay, so our last question is, are there any best practices for allowing reviews to be shared organically?
I'm assuming this is sort of specifically focusing on generating more, sort of new consumers, if you will. And so there are many best practices around it. The first aspect that we kind of touched a little bit upon was the loyalty aspect. So if you have a program, not only can you incent people for writing reviews, you can incent them for, sharing those reviews as well, potentially. So that's an aspect of it. You can definitely run contests around it, which has been done in the past, where you can kind of have an additional reward for sharing the reviews. Now, one of the things that's very important is Facebook and other social channels have stringent rules around not incenting people for sharing itself. So you can't just say, hey, here's the reward for sharing. You can, however, say if someone shared and a friend came back to the site, then that essentially can be a thing that you can essentially reward for. So rewarding for referrals through either contests, potentially loyalty points or loyalty levels if you have a loyalty program, are different ways in how you can do that. You can potentially also run a referral reward program where if a person shares a specific piece of content, it could be it could be a picture, it could be something else, and the friend comes back and actually buys something, then there could be a referral reward for that as well. So that's another aspect. So those are some ideas about generating organic referrals through sharing user-generated content, essentially.
Thank you, Al. Well, if there are no more questions, I think this is it. Thanks, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, feel free to visit our website and contact us. On behalf of the Social Annex team, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.